guys, we're here with UPass and we're going to be checking out the new T-50 today. We're going to be answering some questions that we get asked a lot and get a lot of phone calls on. And the first one we're going to start off with is, what do I do when I actually get to the field for my pre-flight checks? What do I actually need to be looking at? We have all this on upassfoundation.com where you can go check out, and we have a pre-flight checklist built there so you can print it off and use it at your own application disposal. One of the first things when we get out to the field is we're going to have to open up the arms. One of the things that we're looking for when we open up an arm is to make sure that we hear the locking sound. So we'll go and we'll hear it click. When we hear that click, that's going to show that the arm is securely fastened, and you'll also be able to double check this by looking at your remote and seeing that the arm number 1, 2, 3, or 4 has been locked, and the alert will go away.
Yep, and one thing to note with the T-50, and we've got a few different machines here, obviously, P100 Pro. The T-50 actually has a positive lock on a handle versus where the T-40 was just an over-center lock. So some new things, and we're going to try and go through different niceties of one drone versus another and just different things to look at. And yes, pull it out of the trailer. What do we do first?
Yeah, so we're going to get the blade set. I mean, first thing before we have to go fly is we got to check the blades. So we're going to get them straight. We don't want too much tension. So when you're tightening the nuts on top of your bolts, we want to make sure that the black line that you have on them, they're called torque stripes, are matched up to each other. And then you want to be able to move them. If they're super rigid, the drone's not going to be able to compensate like it's made to do. But also, if it's too loose, that nut has the potential to fall out. So we want to make sure that it can move, but that there's no play. You also can take your hand and go from the top base of the blade and run it down and feel for any chips or cracks. On the T-40, all the blades are going to be black with orange stripes at the end. So it's pretty easy to identify any cracks or any chips. With the new T-50, they're white, so it's going to be a little bit harder to see some of these cracks, to see some of these chips happening, and things like that.
And another thing too, as a best practice, I tell a lot of my guys and just people in general, if you replace blades or honestly any bolt that comes in and out of these, I make it a practice to use blue Loctite on. I don't know if you
we use blue Loctite
or Vibratite of some kind. These things vibrate a lot, and I've seen a lot of bolts and stuff and nuts work loose.
Well, yeah, and the big thing
can potentially get dangerous.
Yeah, and don't go overboard on the Loctite, just to drop usually,
right,
and then screw them down to where you're not ripping that screw into there, but it's just tight, and then the Loctite will do the rest to make sure it's secure during flight. We also look at when you're doing chemical spraying, you need to make sure that your tanks are plugged up. One of the things that we see with our guys, everyone can be forgetful, is you're going to do your first flight and your tank's not even plugged in. So on the T-50, the tank plug-in's going to be off the back, and it's actually going to be on the tank itself, where on the T-40, it goes to the front up here, and it's on the underside where you can plug them in together. That's definitely a nice adjustment, because in the T-40, taking spreader tanks in and out, it did have a tendency to get caught a lot. So this is nice because it's right near your spray line, so when you're back here, you can reach everything. Your spray lines are another big one. On the T-40, you just pop them in and out, but on this T-50, there's a nice little lock that you can screw it in to make sure that your line stays in position and doesn't get kinked or anything during flight. They do have the same connector as far as how you plug the pump in. All you have to do is unscrew, pull the little screw back, and then you'll grab the actual line itself and just disconnect it. That'll drop all the pressure that was in here, let all the fluid out, and then you can also come back here and press down on the solenoid, and it will release the rest of the payload that's trapped into that line.
Oh. And one thing I like to look at too when you first fold out, it's probably not something we worry about as much with the T-40 because of the new line style, but T-30, just making sure they weren't kinked and they're getting product out of every nozzle. And obviously now with the T-40, T-50, it's 2 nozzles. T-30s, we had a lot more of that to worry about.
Yeah, so we've checked our blades, we've checked our back sprayers, make sure the lines are connected, make sure the sprayer looks good, it's spinning correctly. Usually if there's a locker in it or something, you can feel it. These should spin pretty freely. without much resistance. Then we're gonna start working in on the drone. We like to work from the outside in because these are very sensitive, critical areas. So check the blades, check the engines, the propulsion systems, make sure there's no cracks in any of the covers or anything like that. And then we'll move to the arm. Run your hand up and down the arm because it's carbon fiber. So these drones are really good if there are any cracks or breaks or dents in it. The carbon fiber will break and it will show you because it'll start fraying on top. Work in, and then we have two very important pieces up here. We have the arm locking bolt, and then we have the smaller bolt that keeps your arm attached. We've seen it a couple times. You guys need to be checking these because where this arm attaches to help it close, we've seen that those bolts can become loose. So checking those to make sure they're staying on during flight, and then making sure your torque stripes are lined up for your locking bolt for the arm. Okay, so we got that. Okay, now we can have a good little reset there for a second.
I was gonna say too, cleanliness is important, whether it's before, you know, when you pack up or getting back out, but I've had it, I'm sure you've had it, the rear radars, the rear black little radars on the T-40s, if they get dirty, it can start doing some really goofy stuff up, down. And I think that goes without saying for every machine. Keep them clean and they're going to operate longer and better. Radar's clean, the vision sensor's clean, the RTK antenna's clean, the lower radar, very important.
Yeah, and taking off your covers, we were just talking about it actually. We do a lot of granular products, so seeding, fertilizing, lime, and those have a tendency, especially on the T-40, to shoot up and into the covers throughout the day. You know, we'll go out and spread seed all day. So when we are spreading that seed, we don't want that seed sitting inside of those covers. So don't be afraid at night when you guys get home to take off the covers, wash the covers off, and be delicate with the screws because they can strip.
Very much so, yes.
Okay. Like I said, we'll be cutting this down too, so.
I don't know if you do it much, but I, from time to time, not necessarily always, but I like to grab my tank when it's empty and give it a little bounce. Make sure it's not stuck anywhere. It'll give you a false volume reading.
Yeah, that's it. And making sure that it's on its points, because
and
the spreader tank, if it's off at all, like you said, one side will be sitting up higher and it'll mess up the calculation.
I'm sure with doing spreading, spraying, everything, you've replaced these 3-point load sensor harnesses and these rubbers, especially. It looks like they've made them a little bit girthier on the T-50 now, but I've had customers lose them on the T-40 and it wears a hole in their tank.
Yeah, exactly. And so you got to keep those on there, and you got to keep them properly maintained. Like we said, cleanliness is huge on these because they are apt to corrosion. We're going to see a lot more corrosion on these with spraying, fertilizers, anything like that, and especially around your cameras. Your cameras, your FPV cameras, are one of your most expensive parts on the drone just for a singular item. So we see that fertilizer a lot of times, seed can also get trapped back there, and if you're spraying, you know,
spray film.
Yeah, you have a small little bit that goes over the top and leaches on. It sits there and it corrodes throughout the day.
Yep, and I see it a lot on the Facebook pages and guys asking about the single point haul, and we'll include a picture of this.
Yeah.
Down in there, you need to make sure it's lined up so when it is dropping over, it's losing contact with the sensor underneath. If they get turned or goofed up at all, you'll get a reading that the hall sensor is not working. I believe if the hall sensor quits working, it shuts you down.
Well, yeah, and last year I saw it, I think a lot of people saw it, is the hall sensor, it was always saying that the liquid level was off.
Right.
I mean, for most people, but it's also an easy part to get in there and change if you know how to get in there.
Whether it's the external part or the internal, they're both very easy to
Exactly.
change.
So like we said, we've looked at all of that. We've looked at the arms working in. Your battery, just like the T-40, it connects in the back. And when you run it down its lines on the side, you're still looking for that click. If you don't hear the click, the battery's not connected fully, and it's definitely at risk to come unconnected during flight.
How about, so after we're finished, what are your practices or best practices for cleaning the drone up, end of day? What do you guys do generally?
Best practices is really, one, doing the triple rinse inside the field. Not doing the triple rinse in the field actually plays to the disadvantage of the applicator a lot of times, because you're having to go home to whatever base office it is and let that little bit of chemical out of your lines and stuff like that, which is just going to end up killing all the grasses around your office and everything like that. So going in the field, and like we said, not being afraid, come up here, disconnect your lines. You guys should be, if you're measuring your pesticides right, coming back with not too much payload left over at the end of a day, or after a full field application, you should just have a little bit left. So make sure that these lines are cleared. Make sure that you've gone behind the drone and you've actually turned the release valve, pulled it out to let all the rest of the chemical out into the field that you're at, and then spraying it down. One of the big things that we see is, like we said, the FPV cameras. And throughout the day, we use a lot of drift agents.
Sticky.
We use LI 700, and it's got some surfactants and stuff in it. That surfactant loves to sit to the binocular sensors on the T-40. So having a rag there, we wipe those down multiple times a day when we're spraying to make sure that they're not sticking and messing up, because when they do, you'll see that with the drone, it'll start raising and lowering again. And
I think too, like you said, it's inconvenient to bring it back to your warehouse or your shed or your office and have that rinsate on your grass potentially. And another thing, if you do it in the field, well, after you get done spraying or bringing it in from the last load and it's got any chemical residue on or surfactant residue, they're really, really sticky. Well, now you go down the road, gravel road, open trailer, closed trailer, they get dusty and the dust just clings to it. So if you can wash even 80% of that off when you're done for the day before you transport again, it's going to overall keep the drone a lot cleaner.
Yeah, we drive around with about 20 gallons of separate fresh water, so that if we go through all of the water in our main tanks for the day, that we always have that 20-gallon reserve to make sure we can at least do a base wash down the blades, wash down the motors, wash down all the sensitive areas.
Run a couple gallons. I like to run a couple gallons of clean water through the tank, through the pumps, through the system.
Definitely.
I've heard horror stories of guys leaving XYZ product in the tank overnight and spend hours trying to clean out
a lot of
pumps
times,
and lines.
Yeah,
and
they've
everything.
gone and sprayed all day and they think, oh, well, I'm going to spray the same product in the morning.
8 hours later.
Yeah, I don't want to have to break this down, wash everything, because I'm literally coming out 6 to 8 hours later to the same field to do the same thing. And by the time they get out there in the morning, half their drone is frozen up because the lines have clogged up, the pumps have clogged up, and it becomes from a 10 to 20 minute wash down into now thousands of dollars worth of parts, multiple days down in the field, and trying to find parts and service to get that done.
And one thing with washing them down too, I want to caution guys a little bit. Brandon, I don't know if you've experienced this at all, but a guy should be really careful with these motors where this air comes in.
Yep.
Those are all wires and coils within there. If there gets moisture and too much dampness, I've actually had them short out, in the air and flying on some customers. So if you're going to be delicate about any area, right here for sure. Probably no direct spray. Definitely no power washer spray.
Well, definitely. And what we actually do for that is we have a bunch of spray bottles that we bring around with us. So most of the time, we have a little feeder line where we'll spray down the body of the drone, spray down the arms and stuff like that. But as we get up to these areas, and we've already washed off the blades, we'll come in and we'll spray the top, wipe it down real fast, spray it, and then immediately after use our compressor, spray it off, make sure that it's dry, but also make sure that we are getting the chemical, because the whole point of this plastic cover is to stop chemical from getting in and sitting on those coils and causing a fire or something like that, because pesticides are combustible.
And you also want them clear because they are for cooling the motor.
Yeah.
When they're spinning, they're sucking air and they're cooling it down. So if they're plugged up with dust or dirt or debris,
and you can
potentially
tell,
adds another problem. Right.
You can put your hand on it at the end of the day, and sometimes they're hot, and it's usually a good indication if it's too warm that you have too much dust, or that you need to go and probably take this cover off and compress it to clean it out, make sure you're getting good airflow back through those engines, because all of these engines are super important and they can't act without each other. So the drone might be able to stay up without one, or you'll have a sketchy landing, but you need to make sure that all of these are clean, because it's the most critical part of your flight.
Absolutely.
Yep.